What AFC East receiver are fantasy owners forgetting about in the mid-rounds? Are FFPC players letting a former Fantasy 101 slip too far in drafts? And should you be taking the 2020 first overall pick over the 2018 first overall pick in the NFL draft? Plus, 2018 world champion freestyle wrestler David Taylor hangs out with us before his big match tomorrow night to talk about what he's seen so far in his Football Guys draft this summer so far. We've got a great show for you. Dave Gerzak is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Let's begin now.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now listening to the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Dave Gerzak. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for football analysis from the best fantasy players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Dave Gerzak.
Thank you, Rob. Greetings and salutations to all you Balkaholics and Gerzak and addicts. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I am, of course, your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman, and my co-host is indeed the patron saint of fantasy football, the Dizzle, Dave Gerzak. Coming up on tonight's show, we're going to discuss what Bengals wideout we like most in 2020, how important it is for Chris Carson owners to grab Carlos Hyde, and Olympic hopeful and former world champion wrestler David Taylor drops in to talk about Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, and preparing for his huge match against Miles Martin tomorrow night. Shout out to the chat room right now. Feel free to post any questions you might have in there. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, at HSFF Hour, at Eric Balkman, at David Gerzak. You can follow David on Twitter, at MagicMan_PSU. Facebook.com/HSFF Hour is where to reach us. And 347-426-3682, 347-GAME-OBA is where you can reach us. The audio engineer and my best friend Bryce and our producer and our mutual friend Rob are answering all the emails at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for us or for David, send those in right now. We'll try to get to all of them, including tweets and chat room questions in the fantasy feedback segment later on in the show. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring in tonight's guest right now. He's a four-time NCAA All-American and Big Ten champion and two-time NCAA champion. He is one of only four wrestlers in history to win the Hodge Trophy twice, which is given to the nation's best collegiate wrestler. You can watch this 2018 World Champion freestyle wrestler on flowwrestling.org tomorrow night when he will attempt to keep his top-ranked status intact in the 86-kilogram category when he takes on sixth-ranked Miles Martin. He is here tonight to break down his Football Guys drafts he's done so far this season right now. You follow him on Twitter at MagicMan_PSU. Please welcome in the Magic Man himself, David Taylor. David, thanks so much for making some time for us tonight on the eve of a big match for you, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm super excited to be here.
So this is exciting to have you, obviously. I think we've had one Olympian on before. Hopefully you can make it to Tokyo next year, and we could say we had two Olympians on. We know that you're always training for your craft in wrestling. How did you find time to get into fantasy football, and how did you find the FFPC, David?
I started, my brother-in-law got me into fantasy football, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I typically get consumed by things really quickly. Like if I'm involved in something, I'm all in. And, I got involved with fantasy football, and I drafted Andrew Luck that first year. I bought an Andrew Luck jersey. I'm like, man, this is fun to root for. Then the next year I was much more committed. Obviously fast forward now, I got into the league with a couple buddies of mine, and at the end of the year they say, hey, we get in this FPC league next year, you should join us. I'm like, all right, great. So this is now my third year in FPC. It's definitely been a learning lesson. It's way different than redraft leagues. I think one of the things that I do is, I try to be pretty proactive, listen to podcasts, but I stay real active on the waiver wire, but I love trading. I'm constantly trying to negotiate trades all the time. So in FPC, that has been one of the things that's been the biggest adjustment for me is realize, man, this draft is super important. The obviously waiver wire is thin, and you have to really stay ahead. But your draft has got to be really important.
It's interesting, too, because I think wrestling is such a sport where you can't blame anybody else. It is just you versus, whoever you're wrestling. And for fantasy football, at least for the Football Guys Players Championship, you can't rely on anybody else for trades. It's all about how you draft. It's all about how you set your lineup, how you manage the waiver wire. There's probably some correlation there between wrestling and fantasy football, right, David?
Yeah, I think so. I think wrestling has kind of taught me that, to be great, in my wrestling, I've been doing it for such a long time. Like it's such a dedication. And I share like a lot of that same, I joke with my friends all the time. Like, fantasy football is definitely my second biggest hobby. My biggest hobby outside of my job, professional, being a wrestler. And I spend a lot of time into it, just trying to look into it as much as possible. But yeah, it's a direct correlation. I mean, so many players just fizzle out at that time. They get to they have that first 4 or 5 good weeks, and then I'm like, that's when I excel. I'm going to dig deep, and I'm going to keep, trying to find players that have promising schedules moving forward, try and find waiver wire guys a couple weeks ahead. But FBC is a different beast. I mean, you're playing against the best of the best, which is exciting, to be able to have the opportunity to play against some pros and guys that you listen to and see on Twitter, really kind of challenge yourself, which is kind of exciting.
All right, I don't know, before I ask you, I have to ask at least one or two wrestling questions.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, fire away.
Before I ask about the Football Guys draft, so have you weighed in already for the match tomorrow night, or do you actually do it right beforehand? How do you guys do it?
So this is a little bit different. So this is kind of our first real pay-per-view type match that we've had in wrestling, where there's been a lot of resources put into it. Similar to when you watch UFC and the UFC cards. So we're down in Austin, Texas right now, and we're getting ready to wrestle tomorrow. So typically I wrestle 86 kilos, which is 189 pounds. Tomorrow, there's weight allowances and with guys going off quarantine. So I'm wrestling at 200 tomorrow. So there's not really much weight management. So we weigh in 3 hours before the event. And really it's about just the performance, getting out there and giving wrestling people the first live event that they're going to see since March 15th, which actually was the last time that I wrestled. So it's typically weight management. You weigh in an hour before you start competing in the international level. So this is a little bit different, not really a lot of weight to be done here, but it's definitely usually a pretty big aspect to what we do.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So normally if this was a different type of event, you'd be, cutting and trying to, keep your calories low, but you can't do it you really do the fluid management probably like the UFC guys where they go way super low and then add 20 pounds because you just wouldn't be able to perform. That's correct?
Some guys still cut a lot of weight. Just in the Olympics, there's only 6 weight classes. They're between, 20, like for example, the weight below me is 23 pounds lighter than the weight that 26 pounds lighter than the weight that I wrestle. So there's a pretty big gap. So if you're you have to make a decision, am I going to go up or am I going to go down? So yeah, there's definitely a lot of weight management because in the UFC, it's 24-hour weigh-ins. There's a lot more weight that's cut. It's done in a different fashion. For us, like on a typical day, I would have eaten dinner tonight and going to bed, and I would wake up early before weigh-ins tomorrow morning, and I would work out before weigh-ins, weigh in, and then get ready for my tournament, get ready for 4 or 5 matches tomorrow afternoon. But tomorrow, I weigh in at 4 o'clock. It's not really much of a weigh-in, and then we start. I think the card starts at 7 Central Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time.
That's awesome. It's just so super interesting.
It is very interesting.
All right, so I could go on and on and on. That's really fascinating. Hopefully you had some Twinkies or something today, or Suzy Q's, whatever. Eat whatever you want. All right, so looking at some of your Football Guys drafts this season, David, it seems like you've really diversified your rosters. Did you do that on purpose? Trying to stay differentiated, just with the COVID-19 going on, you wanted to kind of spread the wealth a little bit.
I think so. I think what I kind of. I don't know the answer because I haven't really done super well in FBC last year. But what I learned last year is I had a team that was 8-2. It was a solid team, but we didn't have a lot of upside. Like we were winning weeks, but we didn't have the high scoring weeks. We ended up 8-4 and missed the playoffs. And I'm like, man, that's tough. Where do we miss? Kind of reevaluating from there. We just, the way that's built, the way guys build out the scoring system is, you have the best record, you make it in, but you need players that have the big upside weeks to be able to get in and be able to continue long term. So, this year my philosophy has been like, hey, I want to get some stability. I like the kind of the one running back approach. Trying to get a stud running back early if I can, and then fill with upside. And I like wide receivers. I think they're a little more durable. I think they can give me that upside, especially this year with the. I just feel like there's a lot of uncertainty. Once you get past, those first 5 or 6 running backs, You get Travis Kelce in the first round. You get some of those high-end wide receivers. That once you start getting those next tier of running backs, second round, third round, it seems to be like there could be a lot of timeshares this year with COVID. There's a lot of uncertainty, where I think with wide receivers, a little more target volume. Hopefully, if I can get the wide receivers correctly, it gives me that opportunity, that upside, and hopefully give me a chance to be playing a little bit longer than Week 12 this year.
We're talking with the Magic Man, David Taylor, the 2018 World Champion Freestyle wrestler here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour tonight. David, it doesn't seem that long ago that Le'Veon Bell was being taken at the 101 in plenty of high-stakes drafts, and then he soured people when he sat out the whole season. And then last year, after he got paid, really didn't perform up to snuff, at least for what a lot of people who drafted him thought he would do. Right now, I look at drafts, and over the last 4 days, and we want to thank Fantasy Mojo, Darren Armani, for putting that ADP together, fantasymojo.com. Make sure you check it out. He's slipping to the 403 right now. Is that too far for Le'Veon Bell, or is that a spot you can get on board with taking him right there?
I just took him recently in one of my last drafts, and it was one of those positions. I'm looking at the running backs. I'm like, okay, where are we at right now? We got guys that are in timeshares. We got guys we're kind of uncertain about. Le'Veon, I start looking down, like, Le'Veon Bell's on the board as a low-end running back too. And I think, I don't remember the exact stat, but last year, as bad as he was, I think that's about where he was. So I'm like, okay, well, you got to assume this year, I think the Jets can be a little bit more improved. He has his pass catching, which is going to give him a nice floor. He gets a couple more touchdowns. Like, I got to think that he's going to outperform where he's been drafted at. So I felt like he was a pretty safe option. I think he's a guy that could still, have the opportunity to be. I don't know if he's a top 12 back anymore, but I think he's a guy that can get higher end running back 2 numbers, and it was worth the risk at that point with the safety and still have some moderate upside.
Yeah, I love Le'Veon Bell this year.
Do you really love him at the 4th round?
Yeah,
just because of the volume aspect, and he's gonna.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, he's got it. He could be a mid-level RB1 possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, his low, where he's being drafted to me is kind of his floor. I mean, he's got so much volume.
It's kind of funny because he catches passes. Who are the other 2 main guys that the Jets added this year? Rashad Perriman, who only shows up for December essentially, and a rookie in Denzel Mims. So largely, it is the same guys as last year. Bell's going to be counted on heavily for pass catching this year, Dave.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the glorious Washington team.
Washington football team.
Yeah, those guys. Terry McLaurin, he had a great rookie season. Do you think he's going to have a second-year player? Do you think he's going to actually make a step forward with Dwayne Haskins, or what do you think of Terry McLaurin?
I'm excited about Terry McLaurin. That's a guy that every time I'm getting to like that 4th, 5th round mix, I'm like, where's Terry? Terry and DJ Clark are the 2 guys. DJ Clark are 2 guys that I really like this year, and I think that McLaurin gives a little more upside potential because he can break the long touchdowns. But I think for both those guys, it's going to be their quarterback play, but how many touchdowns are they going to score? If they can break into that 6, 7, 8 touchdown mark, I think they could definitely be wide receiver 1s this year. I think that both of them could see pretty good volume, especially with Harmon just getting hurt. I do like Sims later in the draft. I think that he's a good opportunity. If something were to happen to McLaurin, I think Sims is a great hedge that you can get way late in drafts. I think he can have some value as well. But Haskins is going to be a big determination of that. How well, I know there's been kind of player talk, coach speak about Haskins making improvements this year. But I'm willing to buy that. They have that chemistry when they played at Ohio State, and I think it's a risk that I'm willing to take at that round for sure.
Talking with David Taylor here, the world champion freestyle wrestler in 2018. David, as you pointed out, for any of the listeners out there, it's that 4-5 turn where Chark and McLaurin are going essentially back-to-back as wide receiver 20 and wide receiver 21. So there is a bit of upside there as you look at drafting those guys. I want to shift the focus here to the tight end position. There seems to be a big 4 in the Football Guys Players Championship this year. Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Zach Ertz, Mark Andrews seem to be, for the most part, going as the top 4, and then there's a little bit of a drop-off to Darren Waller. How important to you is it to get one of those top 4 tight ends in this tight end premium format in your leagues in 2020?
It's an interesting question. I just recently took Kelce in the first round in one of my last drafts, and I feel like I wanted to have at least one draft where I had a premium tight end because I just don't really see myself in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round taking one of those guys when I just haven't figured out the tight ends side of it. I feel like maybe the key is if you can't get one of those guys, you got to find the Darren Wallers where you can get them later and really outperform. And tight end is such a interesting position. I used to always think that you could stream it, but it's becoming a little bit more difficult to stream kind of the haves and the have-nots. So to answer your question, I mean, this is the first time I think in all my drafts I've really had a premium tight end. We'll kind of see how that worked. I felt like it made it a little bit harder as I got down in the draft with some depth in a couple different positions, but those guys make up for it. I mean, they with the premium numbers, they can definitely provide obviously a great floor, but a ton of upside. So I was actually going to ask you guys, like, what is your philosophy on drafting tight ends in this league? I mean, I'm definitely interested and curious what you guys have to say and what most people's philosophy is when it comes to that.
Well, I'll tell you this. For most of the high-stakes players that I've talked to, and some
with your philosophy.
I'm just telling
not their philosophy.
Listen, I am a sponge, okay? I get the best players in the world, like David Taylor, to come on this show, and this is what I soak up. This is, by and large, this is what most of them have said to us. Try to get one of the elite ones, and if it doesn't work out, don't try to go for one of those in that 6 to 10 range, 6 to 11 range. Then, after those guys, the next 4 or 5 go off the board, then you should try to take a couple of stabs at some upside guys and just load up on running backs and wide receivers. Now, we've had guests on this show say that they will purposely let the top, 4 or 5 go and then target, like the Evan Engrams of the world and guys that are going in that range.
Hunter Henry,
Hayden Hurst, all the H guys. Then they'll target those guys on purpose. But I would say, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, to me that has been the feedback that I think we've gotten on this show for the most part from high-stakes owners, and I typically have followed that in most of it. Obviously we don't play in the FFPC, but in the tight end premium leagues I've played in, that's sort of what I've gone with. Try to get one of them, and if I don't, load up at the end.
Yeah, for me it depends a little bit on draft position where I end up, and if one of those guys falls, and if I like one, let's say Zach Ertz, for example, I don't mind him, because he does tend to fall. Sometimes he'll fall to like the 4th round.
Yeah.
And so then, if I was playing FFPC leagues, I'd be like, wow, that's solid value. I'll take him there for sure. I don't mind the 6 to 10 spot if, I don't really like Ingram because they're coming off the injury, but Hunter Henry I like, Hayden Hurst I like. Again, if the value is kind of decent. If I can't get one of those top 8 to 10, then I actually look to try and grab like 3 upside guys.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Dawson Knox I like this year.
I like Jay Sternberger, which I've said on the show before.
Bulky likes Jay Sternberger.
I know Dave does not.
I don't. He's fine. I mean, he's like
he's going so late. I mean,
he's going late.
Yeah.
So, there's a few other players, but so you really have to. The most important thing is really have a plan and pay attention to the position, but be fluid in the draft. I mean, for me, if you don't get one thing, get the other. And one thing I look at is if I see. This is just me personally. If I'm in a draft that's a tight end premium type draft.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I see some guy grabs like 3 top tight ends. Like, because some people go crazy.
Somebody's going to do that in Pros versus Joes this year.
Yeah, people go crazy, so they draft like 3 of the top guys. Like, all right, now I really have to be aware here that this could go south on me quickly because now there's 11 other owners that are getting screwed over by this one dumb guy.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, whether it's dumb or not, one can make the argument.
Well, we haven't seen a ton of success with that strategy. Yeah. I'll tell you this too, David, and I don't know if you have a feeling on this, but ever since the Eagles drafted Dallas Goedert, I have gotten Zach Ertz in so many leagues because everybody just assumes that Goddard's going to ascend and make Ertz irrelevant, and it has not happened yet. This year, again, I probably have him in 3 or 4 leagues, and I'm completely fine with that. So that's the guy over the last couple of years that I've really loaded up on, trying to get an elite guy right away, and he always seems to be the back end of that tier. He's not this year, but he has been the last couple of years.
Who again?
Zach Ertz,
you
were just talking about.
Yeah, right on. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, let's talk about one of your buddies.
My favorite wide receiver. Go, David, do you have something to say? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Appreciate that. I definitely like Hayden Hurst this year. It's just interesting, like you said. Like to me, the 2-hour drafts allow you to rosters more efficient than where you sit down and you have the 60 seconds to draft because you start seeing like those runs where a tight end goes or whatever and all of a sudden you're like, well, man, I want to take this guy, but you got to adapt, and all of a sudden you have a Q bill, and it can get kind of complicated. Where in 2 hours you can kind of take your time, build your roster, have your 4 or 5 guys that you like. You can kind of think about it up into it, and that's really helped me. I feel like I've built better roster this year than what I've had in the past because of that. It allows you to be kind of fluid, and when you see those runs happening, you kind of realize I got to make a decision. I'm either going to take – if I don't get one of those top guys, when the run starts, you got, okay, I'm either going to take one now or I'm going to wait. I'm going to take those upside guys down the road. Jack Doyle is someone that I do like. Philip Rivers has always targeted his tight ends. I do like Goddard. They just need weapons. They don't have a lot of guys that are going to be catching balls this year.
Right.
I think Goddard could be consistent, just from reliable. I think they could be both running that personnel with both tight ends.
It could be. There's not a lot of depth at wide receiver for the Eagles, right? Well, there's a lot of question marks. Alshon Jeffrey could be pumped. Deshaun Jackson's getting up there. Jalen Reagor's a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, those might be the top two targets coming out.
Those guys I don't think have ever been favorites of yours. One guy who has been a favorite of yours is this next player, though.
Yes, DJ Moore, one of my favorite players in the whole NFL. I love him. You took him at 307 in one of your recent Football Guys drafts. I'm curious how you think is. By the way, just because I love him, you can, you took.
Yeah,
him,
it's
so
fine.
You're not
just
gonna
be
crap
honest
on
with
him.
you, David. Yeah.
But, I'm curious how you think his production changes this year with Teddy Bridgewater tossing the rock to him.
I do like him. To me, I think at that pick it was between DJ Moore and Juju, and I like both those guys. I think Juju's going to bounce back this year, with Deontay Johnson on the outside and him moving back to the slot. I had Juju in one or two of my other drafts, so I felt like it would make sense to take a shot on DJ Moore. And I felt like last year he was a guy that was just wide open all the time, and he just had horrible quarterback play and just could never really capitalize. And I think this year Teddy Bridgewater is an upgrade. Like when he played last year, he really peppered Michael Thomas, and obviously Michael Thomas is a superstar, so to compare someone like that. But I think DJ Moore is a guy that can get open, and if Teddy Bridgewater and him can develop a good rapport, I think that DJ Moore can have a really high target season, high target volume, and again it's going to be kind of like with McLaurin and DJ Chark, what a touchdown's going to be. Can he? I know he's got the ability to break the big plays, but if he's going to be 4 touchdowns, yeah, we're going to have maybe a hard time. But I think he's a guy that pan out that year. I assume they're going to be playing from behind quite a lot, and McCaffrey's going to get his. I don't really believe in Curtis Samuel too much. I think Robbie Anderson has his big plays, and obviously, him and his coach have that relationship from college. But I think DJ Moore is the number one receiving option, and he's worth that opportunity and what I feel like he could do this year.
Yeah, I definitely like DJ Moore, no question as well. I think he's, there was a stat I saw last year, and I can't remember what it was. Somebody from, I think RotoViz posted it on Twitter, and it was these qualifying categories, and this is going to be a terrible story because I don't remember what they were, but it was all these elite like Des Bryant, Randy Moss, Michael Thomas type guys, and then DJ Moore was in there, and then the end of the tweet was, give me all the DJ Moore I can get this year. And I loaded up on him last year, and I was pleasantly surprised. Well, I wasn't pleasantly surprised because he was our hype man last year.
Yeah, he did well. I mean, and, it was kind of just, I think it was bad breaks that he just didn't score as many touchdowns as he otherwise could.
Which those are fluky,
Yeah, they are fluky to some extent, yeah.
We're talking with David Taylor, 2018 world champion freestyle wrestler here. You follow him on Twitter at MagicMan_PSU. Let's talk about Seattle here in this running back situation that they have going on there. Who represents the better value to you, David? Chris Carson going at the 406 in Football Guys drafts, or Carlos Hyde at the 1408? And then as an add-on to that question, is it smart to get both of those guys, given that you have to sink a 4th and a 14th into them?
I think Chris Carson's a hammer. I mean, he's a beast when he plays, but he's just not a guy I'm drafting this year. I don't think I'll probably draft him. He doesn't really have much receiving floor. He scores touchdowns, but he's such an injury risk. And this year with COVID and no training camp and not coming off his injury, I haven't really heard anything about where he's at in his progression. Carlos Hyde has been a producer. So I've taken him a couple of times late in drafts, and he's a guy that I don't think that he's going to be a guy that I'm going to be starting consistently, but I think he's definitely a guy you could start in bye weeks, and is just a little bit better guy. I typically in the timeshares, I don't really take a risk, and I'm not saying it's going to be a timeshare, but when there's guys that multiple running backs, I don't typically like to take the top guy. I kind of take the cheapest option, and so there for me, the answer would be Carlos Hyde. Carson was awesome last year. I avoided him last year, and he was awesome for fantasy owners, but I think he's a guy that I'll probably avoid this year and take my chances later in the draft or with a different player.
Yeah, just like we were talking about, Le'Veon Bell goes around kind of in the same spot as Carson. You could take Bell and then take Carlos Hyde, and I feel like that presents a lot better options
that's
than
interesting.
just taking
Carson.
Yeah,
I'm just looking it up right now. Over the last 4 days, Chris Carson has been going at the 408 as running back 22. Le'Veon Bell, running back 20. So very, very close together.
Yeah, a little higher, but
not much, though, to your point. Hey, we got a question from the chat room here, David. This is from our official Ivy League professor think tank. Wasp guy wants to know what rookie running back will score the most points in the FFPC this year. You have a bevy of options to choose from, be it Taylor, Edwards-Helaire, Swift, Dobbins, a bunch of others. Who's your pick for the guy who's going to score the most among those running backs this year?
It's a good question. I think Hilaire's price is a little too expensive for me, to be drafting in the second round. I think Damian Williams probably is going to be the guy early, and so I think that those guys, that offense is so good. I think that there's going to be points to go around. Jonathan Taylor, I think, has a lot of opportunity. I don't know. I would say Jonathan Taylor or I think J.K. Dobbins, I think, are guys that could really leak. So I think Dobbins was drafted probably to take over that spot as well as Jonathan Taylor. I mean, all those guys were. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I like all those running backs. To me, I kind of like the cheapest option, guy that I feel like I can build a roster and then have some of that upside later on. I don't like the Detroit running backs a ton. I did draft Swift. That one's, to me, the scariest of those options. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I am probably – well, here's the thing, and this is going to lead into my next question. Our guest last week, Frank LaPrade, who's won a couple of main event leagues. He's won a Football Guys league. He's actually going to be drafting in Pros vs. Joes coming up in the next couple of weeks too. He is just Mr. Jonathan Taylor, and it is fresh in my mind. He thinks he's going to be a league winner this year. He doesn't think Marlon Mack is a special guy. That Indianapolis offensive line is probably one of the closest things to replicate the Badgers offensive line that Taylor was running behind last year. So he is definitely on board with Taylor. I was listening to a podcast today, and a guy, the host, who I know is very knowledgeable, was very effusive in DeAndre Swift to go to the point of he thinks Swift is going to be the starter even if Kerryon Johnson is healthy week one. He thinks Swift is going to be the starter out of the gate. I think the problem with Dobbins is Ingram is still going to be soaking up too many touches early on in the season, whereas I don't know if Taylor and Swift are going to have to deal with that. And I think Edwards-Helaire is still going to have to tangle with Williams. So right now, Dave, I think my pick is Taylor.
Taylor. I'm going to go with I know there's two Davids on the show. I'm going to real quick. I actually kind of like DeAndre Swift as an option, but I think Helaire is also an interesting choice. Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Well, I was reading, just with the amount of mileage that Jonathan Taylor took, in his college career, that basically he's drafted as, I saw some people that he may be like a one-contract guy, so they would want to use him right away. And I Marlon Mack, he was good. He ran behind such a good line last year, and he's really injury prone. So I was going to say probably if I had to pick one, probably Jonathan Taylor, because I think he's probably most ready week one to simulate a big role and could be a really prominent guy and has been doing that for a while, where I think some of the other guys might be more of a longer-term option based on some of the things that I've heard. That's one thing that's kind of stuck in my mind.
Taylor tested incredibly well at the Combine as well, something to keep in mind there as well. So I really like Taylor. It's interesting because, as I just brought up, Frank LaPrade, who was our guest last week, found out, David, that you were going to be on the show, and he says your name is more of a name in their household than Jonathan Taylor because his son is heavy into wrestling. He's a sophomore in high school, and he obviously knows all about you. He actually sent in – we have two questions for you from listeners tonight, and they're both from Frank. I want to read this. One's kind of involved, this first question, but he writes, wrestling requires a lot of dedication and sacrifice. You might have been on a team when you were at Penn State, but wrestling is the ultimate solitary individual sport. You've done this at an elite level. Football is the ultimate team sport. Are there any lessons that you've drawn from your wrestling experience that translate in how you evaluate players for fantasy, or are the sports so dissimilar that you're in the same boat as the rest of us?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's qualities. I think, to be great at anything, to be a great team player, to be a great individual, player, athlete, whatever it is. I mean, I think it's a lot of the same qualities. So just, guys that, you feel like are going to be producers regardless of what's happening in the game. You see guys sometimes where, the game's out of hand and guys just quit, and they're like, oh man, that's a guy I just don't want him on my team. I want a guy who's going to be fighting to the end. Like Deshaun Watson comes to mind when it comes to that. Like that dude is battling the entire time. I love having him as quarterback. It doesn't matter what score. That guy is slinging the rock, trying to score touchdowns, trying to continue to stick. Where guys who just some guys put their head down and they are okay. They come out of the game. They're not really trying to better themselves. So I think that's probably me as an athlete side, that I take where players that I identify with, that I can identify those same qualities I think have helped the teams that I've been on and helped myself to be where I am now. Is I want the guys that are fighting the entire time, no matter what the score is, no matter what they're going to be battling, keep trying to fight for the team, keep trying to fight for my fantasy team. Those are guys that I definitely try and look for.
Yeah, and I think, too, with Watson, behind that horrid offensive line he's basically had his entire career, he is one of the true warriors of the NFL, no question. Second part of the question here from Frank. He wants to know if you think, David, if you could cradle DK Metcalf.
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, I know he's kind of his nickname's Baby, but, I mean, he's a beast. I mean, that guy is such a beast. But I would say that I probably have a good chance I could still cradle him. I would put him on my leg.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'd put him down there. He'd have a hard time that's going on. And I just wouldn't want to be on my feet with that guy. He's a monster.
Hey, David, I want to ask you this, too, and this is something that Dave and I always ask all of our guests each and every week here on the HSFF Hour. Who's a player that and this is interesting because your rosters are so differentiated. Has there been a player that you've been avoiding in the early rounds, and then has there been a player that you're trying to get in all your drafts, either in the middle part or in the late portion of the draft?
I think sometimes when you're doing your drafts, you gravitate towards the players that you like. You start getting into those later rounds. It's easy to build a roster in the first 6-7 rounds. They're exciting, they're fun. You love those players. Then you start getting a little later, like, well, I don't know. I guess guys are pretty good. I'm early this year trying to find guys I think have the upside. Guys that I think that I can, if they're upside on my bench, upside on my lineup. So I am trying to get as many different players as I can that I think kind of fit that bill. But for me, it's those those first round running backs, those guys that I know are going to get touches. I'm going to, like I kind of mentioned in the middle, I'm going to take my chance on wide receiver. I just don't feel comfortable with those middle round running backs. Like Melvin Gordon comes to mind. Just because I know he's great, he's had a great season, but there's just a lot. It seems like I'm out of mouth with these, and I don't really know where that is. Where there could be weeks with Philip Lindsay's going to have the touches, some weeks Melvin Gordon's going to have the touches. So I kind of like the wide receivers, 4, 5, 6, and then I start looking I like the running backs after that. Those timeshare guys that are upside RB2s where they're an injury away from something happening. They're going to jump into a big role. One guy that I want so far is Kareem Hunt, and I just haven't had a chance to draft him. I've been in 2 drafts this year with Eric Sisson, his name's Pink Stripes, and every time I feel like he's like sniping with my picks. And he messaged me on Twitter, and we were joking back and forth. And he's drafted Kareem Hunt, I think, two of the 3 drafts that we've been in together. But he's a guy I like. I think he's going to have a really good role. But he's expensive. You're going to have to get him, and I've seen him usually in the 5th round. So if you don't have a really solid start to your draft, that's a tough guy to take, but he's someone that I want. Hopefully I can get in one of my last couple drafts before I finish.
Yeah, Eric Sisson, former guest of this show, no question, one of the more talented players out there, so it's interesting to hear you guys battle it out for Kareem Hunt. I like him this year as well, but you're right. His price has gone up, going at the 505 in Football Guys drafts as running back 24 over the last 4 days. That's right behind Chris Carson, David Montgomery, right ahead of Cam Akers, Devin Singletary, and DeAndre Swift.
He's getting up there.
He is getting up there. We'll see.
It was like the mid-6.
Super late, yeah. Because and it's interesting, too, because, we talked ad nauseum about this Chubb Hunt thing, and Chubb really hasn't. I mean, he slipped a little bit. He's now going at the 206, but he's still being drafted as a top 12 running back. And
it's interesting that the Chubb's not really dropping much, but Hunt is moving up.
Yes, absolutely. All right, David, switching back to wrestling, you have a big night ahead of you tomorrow. You take on 6th-ranked Miles Martin. We'll all be watching on flowwrestling.org. What is the toughest aspect of trying to defeat this opponent? Quite frankly, I don't know if you've ever wrestled them before, so kind of take us behind the scenes and what you're willing to share as you prep for this match.
So we haven't wrestled before. We're kind of different generation. So I went to Penn State. He just graduated from Ohio State. As I graduated, he came in that next class, and he was, so he was like that class right after I was. He battled my teammate in college, Bo Nickel, throughout their entire career. So he's an up-and-coming guy on the senior-level circuit. So for us, the senior-level circuit is post-collegiate guys that are training to make world and Olympic teams. We take one guy per weight class in a world year, which is the non-Olympic year. So the 3 years sandwiched in between your Olympic Games or World Championship years, your Olympic Games or your bookends. You take one guy per weight class. So, you have a ladder, you have the number one guy, you have guys ranked below that. So this is a guy that is an up-and-coming guy that's going to be a challenging guy that I'm going to wrestle on the Olympic trials in April, which is a good opportunity for me to wrestle him now. So behind the scenes, I mean, it's been good, during quarantine to be able to have something to train for. I stay in shape, and I'm pretty proactive at, trying to stay ahead of my competition. When it comes to preparation, that's, something with conditioning and is something that definitely favors me in my matches. So, I feel really confident about that tomorrow, and I'm excited to wrestle a good competitor. He's going to be challenged. He's going to challenge me in different situations, and, as a competitor, I want that. I want to wrestle the best guys. I want to challenge myself as much as possible, and, tomorrow will give me that opportunity. So I hopefully, those of you that don't watch wrestling, tune in tomorrow, Flow Wrestling, and watch it. Those of you that are following that watch wrestling, hopefully you guys will tune in and you get some new viewers, and hopefully down the road maybe you'll see my name on the FPC leaderboard if I can draft properly.
That would be tremendous. We'd love that.
So here's my only piece of advice: if you're not doing anything later tonight, spend the $2.99 on Amazon Prime and watch Vision Quest, of course. The best wrestling movie of all time. Matthew Modine, Wrestling Shoot, and I'm sure that gives you a motivation.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that sounds like a pretty good night ritual. I'm going to adopt that, and I'll make sure to mention it in the next couple of days. I was on this fancy podcast.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Probably the worst question ever.
Being on this podcast is one of the most excited things I've been in a long time. I love fantasy football, so getting the invite to come on here was something I was really excited about. So I appreciate you guys inviting me, sharing some time to listen to me babble about fantasy football. And but it's something I love to do, so I appreciate it.
Well, we all follow. Yeah, we're going to follow you on Twitter. I already am. I'm at MagicMan_PSU. We'll check out M2Wrestling.com. Last question before I let you go, David. What can you tell us about the M2 Training Center that you're a big part of?
So that's a youth club that I started about 3 years ago. Started 2017, and we train kids from first year wrestling, 6 years old, all the way up through high school. This is our third year into it. So the kids that we started with. That class is getting ready to go to college, which is pretty cool to see these kids starting to develop and getting, offers to go wrestle Division I schools. And the young kids, continue to progress. So it's, wrestling is obviously something I've done my entire life. I've been exposed to a lot of great coaches, trying to take as many good things as I can from the people that I've learned and be able to pass that on to the next generation. And, it's exciting to be able to change these kids' lives. They see me for most of my life as this wrestler they look up to on TV and on Instagram, things like that. But to have a relationship with them and their parents, personal, to go in there and really help them achieve their goals. And what's special about the M2 Training Center is I'm still actively trying to pursue my goals. So every day that I go in there, I'm training in the morning. I'm going in, I'm sharing what I've done throughout the day with these kids, my trial and errors, the things that I've had success with, my failures, things that I wish I could do a little bit better. And I'm helping these guys, hopefully trying to achieve their goals as well. So it's exciting to see that, exciting to see the smiles on their faces. And, anytime that you can help someone, reach a goal of theirs, that's just something that's really strong. I have a lot of passion for. So It's exciting to help.
Yeah, good for you.
Super.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. And obviously, we're so thrilled that you made some time for us tonight here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. I want you to go, I'm going to let your call go here. You're going to go, let that head hit the pillow, get a good night's sleep.
Watch Vision Quest.
Watch Vision Quest if the mood strikes you, and then we'll all watch you in Flow Wrestling tomorrow, and hopefully root you on to victory. And then best of luck with the Olympics too, dude. That'd be tremendous to see you win a gold medal in Tokyo next summer. Thanks so much for everything tonight. Good luck in all your leagues this year, David. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I've really enjoyed it.
David Taylor, ladies and gentlemen, follow on Twitter at MagicMan_PSU, the 2018 world champion freestyle wrestler in the 86 kilogram division. Yes, Dave.
Well, why do you got to say win a gold medal? You got to put pressure on him. Just make the team, and then let's see how it goes.
Right. Yeah, and he would be, if he does win the gold medal, he would be the first gold medal Olympian we've had on the show. Adrian Blinko, who you remember was the distance runner from New Zealand, who we had on the show. That was a fascinating story. Remember that? He was drafting. It was the last football guys draft of the season, and he drafted it on a plane from Los Angeles back to New Zealand because he was flying. He was coaching in Philadelphia.
That's a lot of trust in the Wi-Fi. I don't trust the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well,
but that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So does the U.S. typically? Because usually certain countries do well in certain sports. Does the U.S. usually do well in wrestling?
I think they do,
right?
I think they have a pretty good history.
Pretty competitive,
I know the Eastern.
The colleges are so good.
Yeah, the Eastern European countries have been pretty big rivals with, especially Russia.
Russia's good, always good.
With the United States over the years. He went to Penn State, did David, and I guess there's a big rivalry in the Big Ten with Ohio State, which makes sense.
Penn State, Ohio State. Iowa's always pretty good too.
Iowa and Iowa State are big for wrestling too. So what a thrill.
Corn.
Well, they're all corn-fed guys, so they're all big muscular dudes. All right, so awesome stuff from David Taylor. I want to thank him for coming on tonight. Really and remember, check out m2wrestling.com. A lot of stuff on there about David Taylor.
I feel like I need to work on my life's purpose a little bit after the M2 wrestling thing. I'm not doing anything.
I think wrestling.
Doing the show. I mean, pros versus Joes is great.
Right.
So happy.
We're
really achieving a lot.
Well, hopefully we're bringing some enjoyment to listeners.
That's actually true.
But I think I've met some wrestlers over the years, and my high school had a pretty good wrestling program, and the guys they're so singularly focused on the goal at hand, so much so that the really good ones transforms their lives, and everything they do, what they put in their body, how they train, the decisions they make off the mat, decisions in the classroom, it all revolves around being the best. And I think that's something that David Taylor obviously does, and with the youth that he's got going on at the M2 Training Center too. Good for him.
Yeah,
if
really
he's
cool.
not making himself better, he's making other people better. So good for him.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's get into it tonight, Dave. I want to get to the rundown here. Thanks to Football Guys, Roto World, and Rob for tonight's rundown. Colts offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni said T.Y. Hilton is, quote, who this pass offense runs through. Jim Aiello on Twitter had this tweet. I'm going to read the full quote from Sirianni here because there's some interesting stuff. I expect a great bounce back from a year he had a lot of injuries. I expect the 2018 version of him. If T.Y. stays healthy, there's no doubt that's what we'll see. He's still the main piece of this offense. T.Y. Hilton is who this pass offense runs through. Now, Hilton, if you remember, Andrew Luck's last year, Hilton had 76 catches for 1,270 yards and 7 touchdowns. Then he had the soft tissue injuries in his last season with Jacoby Brissett. He is 30 years old. He turns 31 in November, and obviously trying to secure a long-term deal. This is a contract year for him. He's healthy, Dave. He's coming into this season without any bumps and bruises, and they got Michael Pittman, who's a rookie. Outside of that, they don't have a whole lot else. T.Y. Hilton, as I tell you where he's going right now. First of all, let me ask you, where do you think he's going?
Oh, that's funny. That's an interesting question.
I'm going to start doing this more often. I think this is compelling
stuff. 606.
601. So good guess there. Yeah. T.Y. Hilton, wide receiver 25 right now.
I feel like I'd win like the little, like the little duck or whatever at the amusement park.
Yeah, you probably would.
Close enough, but not the big.
Not the big duck.
Yeah, not the big duck.
Tyler Lockett, Cortland Sutton, Keenan Allen going right in front of him. He is going ahead of Marquise Brown, Devontae Parker, and Stephon Diggs. I think I like Hilton best out of the three guys behind him, Dave. As far as
the three guys behind him, Marquise Brown for sure, better than him.
Devontae Parker.
Yes.
And Stephon Diggs.
I feel like Diggs is underrated, so I kind of like Diggs similarly to Hilton, but I probably would go to the wisdom of the crowds, which is a new feature on Football Guys.
That's right, yeah.
I'd probably go to the wisdom of the crowds and take Hilton there, but it's pretty close for me.
They are about a half round apart. Do you like Hilton better than any of the receivers going in front of him immediately, Lockett, Sutton, or Keenan Allen? I think I like him better than Lockett.
I might like him better than Sutton, actually. I feel like there's less risk with him than – not that – I'm actually really starting to like Jerry Jeudy a lot, which actually to me means I like Sutton a little bit less.
Yeah.
Jerry Judy's route running, I watched a bunch of his videos. I mean, the guy can't be covered, really.
You know what's funny about this is I don't think I brought this up on this show before, but my local fantasy football show, the Appleton Trophy Fantasy Football Show, which you can hear on 95.3 and 991 The Score, it actually won an award for 2019. I told you this. The 2019 Wisconsin Broadcasters Association awarded our show Best Radio Show. Not Best Morning Show, not Best Afternoon Show, not Best Radio Show in the state of Wisconsin. Media market, of course. So that was awesome.
What does media market mean?
It means we are in the media market here in Northeast Wisconsin. We're not in the large markets of Milwaukee and Madison, Green Bay. We are not in the small markets of, say...
So medium, did you say medium or
medium,
like sorry,
in the middle.
I thought you said media.
Well, we are a media market. We're in the media market.
All right, I'm going to turn my ears on.
In any event, the reason I bring this up was a couple of years ago on this show, these guys, my co-hosts, were not familiar with Dynasty Fantasy Football. And I was talking to them. Actually, this was last year. And we were talking about, and then the worst team gets the first overall pick of any rookies in the NFL. And my co-host said, oh, okay, so if you have the 101 next year, you take Jerry Jeudy, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's who I think is going to be the 101. And he wasn't even close to being the 101.
Yeah, he's like the 107.
It was incredible.
He was going to 106, 107, 108 in a lot of drafts.
Wait, did he go before or after? He went before CeeDee Lamb, right? In the NFL draft.
Yeah, barely. I think
he was behind Ruggs. I knew that.
Because it was 12, 15, and 17, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, so Jeudy was 15 for sure.
Yeah,
I know
12
that.
to the Raiders, 15 for Jeudy
to the Broncos, and then
Lamb
to the Cowboys at 17.
Yeah, and everyone. This is something I read. I think it was some sort of article. Everyone's saying how great of a draft the Cowboys had because they got CeeDee Lamb. He fell to him.
He fell to him, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, but the Broncos needed a wide receiver, and they took Jeudy.
Yeah.
The Cowboys didn't. Hang on.
Yeah.
The Cowboys didn't even need a wide receiver, and they took Lamb, and they got the great draft. Why? How is that so great? You didn't even need anybody. You had Gallup and you had Cooper.
Right.
What's so great about it?
All right, so a couple of things here to unpack. Number one, I think a lot of people said Denver had a great draft too. In fact, most people I think said Denver did a really good job.
That doesn't help my story.
Now, as far as the Cowboys argument, I'm with you. They didn't need him. Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys, who actually I think he's going to be drafting Sunday night here on Pros vs. Joes, he has said over the years, there's nothing wrong with making a strength stronger. Whether you have a lot of great pass rushers, there's nothing wrong with adding another great pass rusher. You have a really strong offensive line.
Who's this, Sigmund Bloom?
Sigmund Bloom.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of that, I've noticed he's also been one of those players who's drafted 3 tight ends in a row. Speaking of
he's having a lot of fun. He was in the Pros vs. Joes.
Sigmund's great.
He was in the Pros vs. Joes Dynasty.
Yeah.
Superflex best ball league.
He drafted 7 quarterbacks until they kicked him out.
And is that really what happened?
No,
I didn't think so. But he talks about it a lot on the Football Guys podcast and how it is triggering his brain. Okay, what do I trade this? What do I do here? There's all these, because it's all these different. It's a very unique format, and it's a startup.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways.
There's a lot of ways you can go with it, for sure. Yeah.
But in any event, he always said there's nothing wrong with making your strength stronger. He had a great offensive line, add another offensive lineman. Right. So, and remember that Mike McCarthy, when he's in Green Bay, granted, I don't know what type of offense he's going to run with Dallas, but most of his offense in his prime in Green Bay was mostly 80-85% of the time 3 wide receiver sets. And now you have Cooper, Gallup, and Lamb.
And mostly crappy wide receivers. God.
Well, there's a lot of second-round picks.
He could have really used a lot of those. He could use those wide receivers that Dallas has. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, James Jones, those guys are all good. Devontae Adams.
Yes. They're good players. They're good. They're very good.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. What were we talking about? T.Y. Hilton. I like Hilton this year. And this is a guy I've never liked in the past, but now his ADP is matching up with a price I'd rather have him at.
Yeah, if you recall it, we would always talk about how T.Y. Hilton was the 2-12.
And he's not going on the turn this year.
He's not going on in any. Yeah.
Oh no, yes. Six turns.
2 turns later.
Yeah, he's going 2 turns later.
That's a nice turn.
I believe I'm correct in saying you would draft Hilton over Keenan Allen.
1.5 turns later.
1.5 turns later. You would draft Hilton over Keenan Allen, right?
Yeah, because Tyrod Taylor sucks.
Okay. I kind of figured as much. You think Allen's going too high, wide receiver 24?
No, not really. I mean,
mid-fifth?
He's still pretty talented. I mean,
okay.
Tyrod Taylor, even though he sucks, he's still going to throw for 3,500 yards probably.
Mike Reese from ESPN Boston reported Mohamed Sanu hired a full-time coach to live with him this offseason, Dave.
Who did?
Mohamed Sanu. He's hoping that this is going to create a situation where his relentless offseason work produces tangible on-field results in 2020. Do you remember?
Is he a PR firm? Who wrote that?
This is a quote from Mike Reese's article on ESPN Boston.
Okay.
I believe it's a quote from Sanu.
Wow.
Anyway, you remember
the vernacular.
The Patriots gave up a second-round pick to acquire Sanu, and then he proceeded to be hurt most of 2019. Again, this is off-season. He's faster, he's quicker, he's leaner, he's in better shape. He had off-season ankle surgery. Dave, I guess my question here is, I like Edelman this year. I think he's going too late. Mohamed Sanu, though, is going really late. 1807 as wide receiver 79. Are you willing to take a chance on him with Cam Newton throwing the ball to him, say in like the 17th round?
For sure, yeah. Why not? I mean, Edelman's – we always talk about the receivers that are too expensive. I mean, I think the receivers on New England are way too cheap. You could take Edelman, Sanu, and N'Keal Harry, right? And
Edelman going at the 709. And
he's moved up,
but not much. And N'Keal Harry going at the 1307, so you couldn't draft all of them.
Yeah, 7th, 13th,
I'm sure I'd want to do that, by
and
the way.
18th. But I mean, seriously, Cam does throw for a lot of yards.
Yeah.
And who's their tight end?
Well, they drafted the two rookies. They have Devin Asiasi and Dalton.
Yeah, crap. Total crap.
That was my next question. Do you like either of the rookies?
Total crap. And then you have James White. Granted, he catches passes. But then, if Sonny Michel's out there, they're not throwing to Michel hardly at all.
Damian Harris. Do you like Damian Harris at all? There's been a little bit of a groundswell for him.
And, not so much. I mean, and the reason is because he did so much of nothing as a rookie. I got to see a little something as a rookie.
Okay. So you're willing to miss the boat on Damian Harris at the 1301?
Yes.
I am not.
At the 16th to 17th round, I would take him. But the 1301, I think I'm going to pass.
I mean, he's going ahead of Devontae Freeman, Justin Jackson, and Nyheim Hines. Actually, I might take Hines there over Harris, even though, that's almost a full round later. But Hines I kind of like. But, after that, there's not Anthony McFarland, Josh Kelly, Raekwon Armstead. Carlos Hyde, I guess, is intriguing.
Josh Kelly is interesting. Armstead is kind of interesting.
Do you like
Hyde is for sure interesting.
Hyde's for sure interesting, yeah. I feel like we've asked our guests this. I don't know if I've asked you this. Who do you like better between number one, if you take Austin Eckler, are you handcuffing him? And if you are, who are you taking between Josh Kelly and Justin Jackson?
Well, the answer is probably not, and because the other answer is I don't know.
Right.
I don't know who do you take?
I think for me,
Justin Jackson was a 7th round pick.
Yeah, I think
that Matt Waldman loved. That's effectively his career is Matt Waldman loved him, and he was a late round pick.
Yeah. I think I'd take Kelly. He's a 4th round pick this year, and they're talking about him getting goal line too. And if Eckler were to go down to me, Kelly would make a lot of sense for getting a lot of touches. In that should be a run-based offense.
In a normal training camp situation, I would totally agree with you, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying it gets tougher for Josh Kelly. He's going to have to really do well. They don't have a single padded practice until August 17th or later.
Yeah.
So it gets challenging. But you can see who's good.
Yeah.
Without
we kind of know who's good too.
Well, the team can.
Right.
The team should.
We should mention that too. The NFL owners submitted some changes.
Yeah, it's only super important.
The NFL owners submitted some changes to the COVID edition, CBA COVID edition, and then the NFLPA Executive Committee approved it unanimously, I believe. And then it went to the full player vote, and I believe the players passed it 29-3 tonight. So as far as everything's going, it's motoring along. NFL's going to have players reporting to training camp on Tuesday.
That's fantastic. Speaking of that, when is the main event early bird deadline?
I was going to say that at the end of the show, but I can tell everybody that if you want to wait till training camp starts, you're going to miss out on that. Now, it's not the early bird deadline, but it is the early draft slot deadline. If you want the early draft slot by August 2nd, make sure all your teams are paid for in full and registered by Monday at midnight Pacific. And then that way you will find out where you're drafting in the main event at least a month ahead of time, depending upon when you're drafting.
That's right. It could be 1st. It could be 12th. And you might be happy or you might be sad. And you might be sad if it's 1. Some people don't like the 1 pick. And some people love the 12. So who knows?
Hashtag that's fantasy. And then some people like two-packer get the 1 pick and take Miles Sanders. All right, so moving on here.
That's cray-cray.
A.J. Green, Dave. We haven't talked about him. He signed his franchise tag and is going to report to training camp. This according to the Bengals.
They franchised him.
The Bengals on Twitter. Not going to read Vice President Katie Blackburn's quote because it's pretty boring. Green's going to be under contract this season. He is going to be a free agent after this year. He says he wants to play 4 more seasons. He also says he wants to retire a Bengal. He did not play at all last year, Dave. Joe Burrow is now his new quarterback. That's probably a long-term upgrade over Andy Dalton. Not sure if it's a short-term upgrade. But he also has Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins there. A.J. Green, basically going, and I think, now I don't even want to frame the question this way because I know what you're going to say. A.J. Green's actually moved ahead of Tyler Boyd in ADP over the last 4 days, going at the 702, Boyd going at the 705. If you're going to take one Bengals receiver, is it Green or Boyd?
I take Boyd because he's way safer.
Okay.
And you know, Boyd has upside. Boyd could actually outproduce Green even if they're both healthy all season. I know that's weird to say, and
right.
Constantly people will say you're crazy. That's not true. It's possible. It's totally possible that he could.
I am not convinced that A.J. Green stays healthy all season.
No offense, but that's not a bold statement because he always hurt all the
time.
All
right, so let's make it bolder. I expect A.J. Green to miss more than a few games this season.
There you go.
I don't believe he plays in all 16. I think he's probably closer to like 11 or 12, quite frankly. It's interesting because I want Green to stay healthy because Boyd actually produced better with Green in the lineup, which we said on the show, as you pointed out before. But Green still produced last year without A.J. Green, too. I feel like T. Higgins was drafted as the quote-unquote A.J. Green replacement, and they will let him seek different waters next year, and it'll be the Higgins and Boyd show. I like Boyd in the mid-7th. I know Scott Connor, who one of the co-hosts along with Jay Reed for the I listen to it all the time, and I can't remember. Chasing the Helmet. Good God. The Chasing the Helmet podcast. I know Scott Connor is big on Tyler Boyd this year as well, and they've drafted him a ton, which, by the way, you should check out that podcast. They do a lot of live drafts on there, too. I'm with him. I like Boyd quite a bit. I like him over A.J. Green, and I'm not buying into, hey, he's signed, he's healthy. I don't think it stays that way. I think he stays signed. I just don't think he stays healthy.
Yeah, I think Burrow's going to have a good rookie season. You know, C.J. Uzomah is really pretty much a nothing at tight end. He'll get a few catches here and there. And I'm kind of liking Mixon, too. I mean, just as part of that overall offense.
Right, yeah.
It's finally time to like Mixon because they actually have a competent quarterback.
Do you want to do
not that red-headed, fair-skinned guy? I mean, you can't.
The Red Rocket?
Yeah, who likes people like that? Wait, that's kind
no comment. All right, so
I have a good tan going, Balky. I've been outside all summer.
All right, so let's see how much you like Joe Mixon. We'll do a would you rather here with him. I'm going to start with guys going in front of him, and then I'll switch to guys going in back of him. We'll see where the DG scale is here.
You shouldn't reveal that to me. You should just skip around.
Okay, fine. I'll jump around. Joe Mixon or the two-packer darling Miles Sanders?
Mixon.
I agree. Joe Mixon or Derrick Henry?
Henry. That's close though.
All right, I'm going to say Henry, but I wouldn't take either one of them. Joe Mixon or Josh Jacobs?
Mixon for sure.
I agree. Joe Mixon or Kenyon Drake?
Mixon. Yeah, really? Are you serious?
I don't know. This is tough.
Okay. Drake's not really that pedigree, and he's had a half season of evidence.
There's the offense that he's running it is going to be awesome.
Allegedly.
The only guys behind him are basically handcuffs. I don't think Eno Benjamin or Chase Edmonds are going to be taking his job anytime soon. He doesn't have a lot of mileage on his tires because he didn't run that much.
Who's taking Mixon's job? Rodney Anderson? I mean, come on.
No, it'd be Traquan Williams or Travion Williams. Traquan Williams.
Whatever.
Travion Williams, and then Giovanni Bernard's there too.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so throw that point out. And I'm not saying I like Drake better than Mixon. I think it's closer for me than what you think. What's that Arizona offensive line like? I don't think it's very good.
Generally garbage.
Yeah. Okay, I'll lean Mixon. All right, last one, Kenyon Drake or potential holdout, Dalvin Cook.
All right,
or Joe Mixon or Dalvin Cook, excuse me. I forgot who we're talking about here.
I'll take Cook over both.
I would too. And I think that should wrap that up. Okay, so last thing I want to bring up here. Apologize, we're not going to get to any emails. This might be antiquated at this point, but I want to read it anyway because this is one of the few players that publicly threatened to sit out as far as fantasy players go. We just got the news right before we went on the air that Lawrence Duvernay-Tardif, the doctor who played guard for the Chiefs to some critical acclaim, decides that he's going to work in Canada. I don't think in the front lines. I think it was like a senior center that he's going to be doing work. So he's taking the year off. Does that change your evaluation on Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Damian Williams at all, Dave, knowing that they're going to be missing a starting guard this late in the game?
You know, it's not great news necessarily.
I was
maybe a tad.
I was kind of avoiding Edwards-Helaire anyway.
Yeah, I wasn't taking Edwards-Helaire. I wouldn't take him in that spot. Williams, I would still probably take him that same kind of.
I think I would too.
Because I feel like that was a value before, and it's still kind of a value here.
Damian Williams, 605. Give me all that all day over Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the 210. I mean, you're getting like 4 rounds of value there, or 4 rounds of,
605 though, to be honest, is not cheap for Williams. That's a significant.
Well, okay.
He used to be going in the 7th,
okay,
7th, and sometimes 8th, and now if he falls to that, now it's a little better.
So let's bring this up here. A guy's going right around him. Would you rather have Damian Williams or Mark Ingram? Basically going at the same spot.
I might rather have Ingram, to be honest.
I think
Ingram's a damn good running back.
Yeah,
he's a badass.
What about his real life teammate, Damian Williams or J.K. Dobbins?
Actually, I like Dobbins' skill set a lot too. So it's weird because I can't say I like them both better than Damian Williams, but maybe I can.
You are not taking Ingram and Dobbins together, right? And like investing a 5th and a 6th round pick in those guys?
In a best ball, I would consider it, depending upon team format.
Okay.
But that would be like at a 5-12, 6-1 turn if I was reaching on both a teeny bit.
Here's a guy we've just been discussing via email. Damian Williams or Ronald Jones, going back-to-back in the mid-6th.
I'm starting to really like Ronald Jones.
I would take Jones over Williams.
I like Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones has upside. He has top 12 upside. As weird as that sounds, there's 32 teams in the NFL.
Yeah. I'd give you odds on that if you want to.
I know. I'm not saying. Look, I know. I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. I'd give you odds.
20% chance or whatever it is, but there's a chance.
I was going to give you better than 5-1.
All right, how many do you give me? 7-1.
I'll give you 7-1.
All right, I'll take Rojo at top 12, 7-1. Book it.
I got 5 on it.
I got 5 on Rojo at top 12.
This is interesting. So Ronald Jones
for $5. I can win $35 on Rojo. God, this is so much better.
No, 7-1, right? Yeah, 7-1. Sorry.
7.
All right. And this is great. I actually hope I lose this bet because it'll be great for my Blake Carrington Dynasty League.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. So this is the whole issue I wanted to bring up. Todd Gurley said he's open to sitting out the season if the NFL doesn't come up with a proper COVID-19 safety plan. This according to 92.9 in Atlanta. They did come up with a plan.
A radio station?
No offense. This is where he was doing a radio interview.
Yeah, no offense, but it's a radio station.
Okay, but come on. So Gurley, I don't know how he feels about this plan, but his player rep, whoever it is for Atlanta, obviously, they all voted for it. Gurley is one of the first, maybe the first fantasy player that we've heard about potentially sitting out this season. Dave, you and I have talked about Todd Gurley and liking him this year. I actually took him as my number 3 running back in the Scott Fish Bowl. It's going at the 303, running back 15 in the Football Guys Players Championship over the last 4 days. Knowing this, are you going to skip on him and go with a different running back or a different player there instead?
No, not at all. He's just talking crap.
Okay.
And then they signed
this
a deal.
This is player speak.
Exactly. It's player speak. He's just talking crap to some radio station DJs. And now they signed a deal. He's like, oh, okay, I'm good.
I don't know if he said he's good, but
what is he going to forego? What does he make? Like $8 million a year?
There's something in the provision this year that you can opt out and you make $150,000, but your contract tolls. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, there's no way. I would lay like 60-1 that Gurley plays.
There was I was listening to Mike Tagliere from Fantasy Pros, who was doing a podcast with Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys. And he did some research. He's been doing a ton of researp this offseason, as a lot of analysts are, because there hasn't been anything new to report on.
They have nothing to do.
Right. And he said, and I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to give you the gist of it. For teams that score like the Atlanta Falcons have scored the last couple of years, if you are the starting running back on that team, you have a 72% chance, maybe it's 78%, I forget. It was in the 70s. Of being a top 6 running back for fantasy purposes.
That's insane. It's crazy.
And he's going in the 3rd round as running back 15.
Gurley's a super value.
What would be interesting, and we won't know until,
and who's Gurley's backup? Do we even know that?
It's interesting. I was on Fantasy Alarm this week with Howard Bender and Jim Bowden, and we were actually talking about, we were talking off air about this. But
Jim Bowden, the pitcher guy?
No, that's Jim Bowden, ball 4. No, Jim Bowden, former Major League Baseball GM with the Reds and Nationals. Yeah. So anyway, we were talking about this off air, and Howard is of the opinion that while it might seem right to take Ito Smith as the backup for Gurley, he thinks it's actually going to be Brian Hill this year.
Oh, wow.
Because he doesn't think Ito Smith is big enough to handle the load if Gurley were to go down, where he thinks Hill would get more touches.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's
the way,
his ADP, like 40.06?
Brian Hill?
Yeah.
It's off the charts, I don't even know if he's being 17.06 is running back 69.
Way higher than I thought.
There was, and I'll just shameless plug for one of our fantasy partners, Fantasy Alarm. if you have their draft guide, go in and check out the Howard Bender running back handcuff article. There is some eye-opening stuff in there as far as who you think is the handcuff and who actually will be. Again, this is according to Howard Bender, who is a successful fantasy player. He'll be drafting in Pros vs. Joes again this year. But eye-opening stuff there as far as content goes. All right, so we had an eye-opening show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Whew! What a day. Sorry I could not get the emails. We have been failing on and by we, I mean me, been failing to get the emails.
It was a great show. You did fine.
Okay, well, I want to thank you.
David Taylor did fantastically well.
Yes. I want to
I feel like he pinned us. You know,
it
was a W.
Takedown for him, no escape for us, and
2 points.
We left our shoes on the mat. All right, so thanks to David Taylor. Remember to follow him at MagicMatt_PSU, M2Wrestling.com, and FlowWrestling.org is where you can watch him battle Miles Martin tomorrow night. That'll be fun. I want to thank Dave Gerzak, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and, of course, each and every one of you. Happy birthday, Dave, to one of the day drinkers, Jason Goldman, celebrating the big 4-0 today.
He's only 40?
He's only 40, yeah.
I feel like total crap.
I think
I feel super old now.
It's all the day drinking that makes him look older.
This is awful.
I'm just kidding.
Actually, yeah, that's true. It's a good point. So I feel like I look the same age as him, so I should feel better about myself.
Feel better about it. Anyway, happy birthday to Jason Goldman. Awesome. Hopefully
great.
he's having a great night. All right. So
I don't know we're doing birthdays now.
Yeah, we've done birthdays before.
Oh, okay.
By the way, Henry Muto celebrated one yesterday. Should give him a shout out.
How old is Henry Muto?
I don't know exactly. I could not tell you offhand. Oh. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Henry.
Yeah.
Please don't send us any more emails questioning our rules, decisions, or anything.
Well, no, you can send emails. That's fine. Yeah,
actually, I mean, just send them to Balky.
Okay, yes, thank you. I don't email Dave. Okay, so the other thing I want to bring up tonight is normally this is the time where I would say, hey, we'll be live next Friday. Here's our guest. We will be live next Friday, but we're going to be live before that. Coming up this Sunday at 8/7 Central, we'll have a live broadcast of the 2020 FFPC Pros vs. Joes Slim Shady League number 1. You can follow the draft board on youtube.com/highstakesfantasyfootball. You can listen in to the pick-by-pick coverage, again, starting at 8/7 Central. The pros that we're going to have Sunday night, Rotoballer Scott Engel, Big Guy Fantasy Sports Bob Lung, Pat Thorman from Establish the Run, Addison Hayes over at Dynasty League Football, Todd Burrows, former guest of the show.
No one cares.
The Run to Daylight podcast, and, of course, the aforementioned Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys. The Joes, Dave.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Now we care.
The next High Stakes Lowdown guest, Jimmy Wagner, will be drafting Sunday night.
What a coincidence. Tom
Greenwald, the two-time Football Guys regular season champ, is going to be in that draft along with John Anderson. Richard Mallon, of course, FFPC favorite.
Mallon's Invaders?
Yep.
Who's the one you said before, Mallon's?
John Anderson is going to be drafting as well.
He's a Cleveland Browns fan.
Is he really? Yeah, I think you might be right, actually.
Yeah.
Matthew Zimmer, Matt Stewart are going to be sharing a team along with former guests of the show, Ryan Poole and Lou Tranquilli. They will both be sharing a team. My money's on the Joes. This is going to be a tough field for the pros. A reminder to everybody, we got good news from the NFL today. Take advantage of that before those flight prices go up, before the room. Well, I guess the rooms in Vegas won't go up as long as you book with the FFPC. Make sure you check out the FFPC e-newsletter, the FFPC blog, the FFPC main event page on myffpc.com for that link, and you can get hooked up on your room. Remember, $400 off each additional main event teams. 3 days until the early draft slot deadline. Make sure you're getting that in before Monday at midnight. Football Guys, Terminator, Best Ball Dynasty sign-up. Sign up for the midnight draft tonight. Your weekend starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com that was broadcast live and heard around the world. Eric and Dave will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from a guest much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
I should have mentioned one of the participants we had in the chat room tonight was the prognosticator, and I didn't give him a shout-out in the air. I feel like that might be the last time he shows up.
Oh, who cares? He left early anyways.
Oh, he did? I thought he stayed for the whole thing.
No, I mean, he left. He's not listening now.
He just wanted to hear David Taylor and then and then cut out, which is totally fine.
Yeah,
we get it.
Yeah, he has a life. What does he want to say? I'm listening to this the whole time.
Well, I mean, it's a nice departure, right?
That's true. Bulky, real quick, I'm doing a Peloton FTP test tomorrow.
Oh yeah, what does FTP stand for?
Functional threshold power. I'm trying to get my power up. So I'm nervous.
Why would you be nervous? What happens if you don't?
Nothing.
Do they cut off a toe? I don't know.
No one cares.
I don't know how.
I'm trying. This is my wrestling. This is what I'm trying to achieve.
I gotcha.
I probably shouldn't have had any wine tonight, but that's okay.
A little wine will help you with the weigh-in tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. And Ronald Jones, if you're listening, feel free.
Don't suck.
Feel free to lose me some money because I'm rooting for you, buddy.